Hello and welcome to Latika Takes, a podcast with me, Latika Bourke. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. This week, I'm in the beautiful but frozen cold and bombarded Black Sea city of Odesa in southern Ukraine. This is my third visit to Ukraine, but my first to Odesa. It's absolutely beautiful city. It's got that same Parisian vibe as Kyiv. Amazing food and drink and, of course, hospitality. But there's no escaping the war here. Last night, there were huge explosions around 1 a.m. just outside my window. I actually thought they were much further away from the sound than they were when I woke up the next morning and looked up where they were. There were even more at 7 a.m., which I missed. Turns out these drone attacks were just a few blocks away, 7 minutes drive to be exact. And I will include in the show notes just some footage of what took place. Of course, all the targets were civilian and one person was killed. Today's guest is an opposition MP representing the city of Odesa. You might remember last year I had a government MP belonging to President Zelenskyy's party on the podcast. That was Alexander Merezko. I've not yet had an opposition one. And I invited Oleksii Goncharenko on to the podcast after listening to a briefing that he gave to a group of UK and Australian delegates and parliamentarians visiting for UK Friends of Ukraine ahead of the very grim, let's face it, 4th anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Oleksii Goncharenko was also at last week's Munich Security Conference, so I know a bit about him, and he was there pushing for tougher US sanctions and also pleading with Europe very directly, as you'll hear in this podcast, for Europe to step up. And one of those things he wants is to send the coalition of the willing in now. Now, keen listeners of this podcast and readers of Latika Takes will remember that this is something I reported on exclusively last September when Boris Johnson, the former UK Prime Minister, first made this very call. And then you might remember I interviewed Kurt Volker in Kyiv, and he also backed this idea. So we discussed this, a lot of the domestic political situation in Ukraine, which is changing, although not that you'd necessarily know it if you're an outsider and you just look at international coverage of Ukraine. And that's also what I wanted to talk about in this interview. I'll include some links to some of my pieces about the various corruption scandals, the protests that you might remember erupted last year when I was also in Kyiv and I reported on that, and all these things that have started to just chip away at Zelensky's image, I would say much more domestically than internationally. Because, of course, the Ukrainian president, the wartime leader who heroically did not run, rallied his brave people to fight this illegal and unjust invasion, is someone the world still places in high regard. I think I saw a poll last week where he's the most liked leader around the world. And these are some of the competing dynamics that you'll hear I put to Mr. Goncharenko. So thank you for listening to this special interview from very beautiful Odesa. It really is my hope that when this war is over, you all get to come and see this country and this city. It's got so much to offer that's not related to conflict. For now, let's get to the interview. Oleksii Goncharenko, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for the invitation.
What's it like being an opposition MP during wartime? Because surely political unity is Ukraine's greatest strength.
Yes, but I should be frank with you that we are not so united like it was in the beginning of the full-scale invasion. There are many reasons for this. One of them is that President Zelenskyy did not decide to create a national unity government, which I think would be a right thing to do, and to include all parties in the government and to work all together. He refused to do this, and we have quite a lot of political battles already. And it is complicated to be opposition MP in general, and it is more complicated to be opposition MP during a martial law time. I should be frank with you that President Zelenskyy is becoming more and more autocratic. It is 4 years of full-scale invasion, a martial law time. Martial law time is not best time for democracy to flourish, for sure. But also when for 4 years you can't be asked, for 4 years when you got used to that you are not asked, that you have absolute power, then there is a formula: power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and nobody in the world ever proved something different. So it is complicated. We try to influence what we can, but unfortunately, very often we are not heard.
From the outside, it looks like President Zelenskyy has been nothing but a magnificent success for your country. He rallied support from the international community. He has inspired generations. Is this not worth it, what he has done for your country internationally?
I know it is very important, and partly it's true, but partly, and it's a part of picture. So if we want to see the whole picture, but it will take some explanation. So what do I mean? President Zelenskyy was president not from February 2024, 2022. President Zelenskyy was president from 2019, from May 2019. So if we want to give a session, we need to look at the whole this period. And I should tell you that during this period, there were moments when he was great. For example, beginning of full-scale invasion. That's what you are telling. But also, let us be frank, that first of all, the world admired the resilience of Ukrainian people in general. And President Zelenskyy became the face. He embodied this resilience, and he did it greatly. And I think the fact that he's an actor, that he has this charisma, it helped a lot. So he did a great job. I absolutely agree with this at the beginning of full-scale invasion in raising this support for Ukraine. But at the same time, he did a very poor job in preparing country to the war from 2019 to 2022. And it's not something I am saying just because I don't like him and I'm from opposition. I don't have personal things with him. But in 2019, when he came, by the way, under slogans that he will make peace with Russia. And he was telling that Russia wants peace, he thought at that time. So he decreased financing of army. He decreased many weaponry programs. He rearranged this money to, for example, road building and so on. I was one of MPs who at that time in the parliament came and said publicly, if you will build roads and you will not build Ukrainian army, then Russian tanks will take these roads. And I'm very, very upset that unfortunately I was right. Also, the immediate beginning of the war, for several months, as you know, the world was informing us that Russia will attack from autumn 2021.
I remember this so well. I thought it was bizarre that Zelenskyy was holding press conferences telling the international media to stop saying war might begin in your country because it was damaging the economy. But this was based on intelligence coming out from your partners. Is this the kind of failure to prepare the society that you're talking about?
Yes, it is. And as now we know, first unpublicly from September, October 2021, Americans started to inform about Russians' preparation. But in November, I think, Americans decided to make it public, which was unprecedented. Because we need to agree that it was a courageous step from Biden administration, because first, if this data would be wrong, or if Russians would change their mind, that would hurt American believe in American intelligence, and they would say it was political game for something and so on. So they really risked this, but as we now know, they were absolutely right. So they started in November 2021 to say it openly. Then Burns, head of CIA, came in January 2022 already. And all the time Zelenskyy was saying, we are not sure, we don't see this, we don't believe in this. And especially, it was after this visit of Burns in January, there is a video, very famous in Ukraine, but famous from a war, not good point of view, when Zelenskyy came and said, this is not attack on Ukraine, this is attack on our nerves, don't be scared, don't prepare for anything, prepare for grill in May, they will have a beautiful summer, vacations, everything will be as always, nobody will attack us. And we could say that it was part of his game to protect economy or something, but unfortunately it was the same he was doing. At that time, for example, me and my colleagues, we proposed to change Ukrainian budget to send more money to military. Yes, maybe it was late, but we still had several months to buy some weaponry, to produce, to recruit more people, and they refused. Governmental party refused to do this. And they said, no, we can't stop our road building program, we can't stop social welfare things, or even decrease them, so we will not do this. So he was not preparing country to the war. And this is objective reality, and that was a huge mistake. And the second, so we have period before, where he did a great mistake. Then we have a period at the beginning and after when he did a great job. But also, the country is not just about international support. The country is about what's going on inside, how the country is run internally. And here we have a big problem again. Then last year, corruption scandals, and last year, many things, poorly built fortifications, many problems in recruiting and so on. And it's because Zelenskyy believed just very close circle of people, his entourage. He said it publicly at one press conference a year and a half ago, I think. He was asked about national unity government, and he said, I don't need it. I have 5-6 managers whom I believe, and we run the country. The problem is that at least 2 of them now are under corruption investigations. And in general, such country as Ukraine, in such war as we have, can't be run by 5-6 people. There should be institutions, and all should be involved. And he refused to do this. So these, if you will see the whole picture, in this picture, there are absolutely wonderful things that he did. But also in this picture, there is a very awful things that he did.
So given all that, do you agree with his push to have elections if Russia grants you a ceasefire for a certain amount of days?
Absolutely against, because I don't understand what does it mean. So he said recently in one interview that if Russia would give us 60 days of ceasefire, we will make elections. But it means that after this, the war will continue. So my first question is, for what? What is the reason for this? Why should we do this? As you hear, I'm opposition to President Zelenskyy and quite critical about him, but I'm telling you, he's absolutely legitimate president of Ukraine. There is no questions about this. He's legitimate president. He's legitimate commander-in-chief. What for we need to make elections and then to continue the war? Why should we just lose time on this, money, resources, to fight internally? Because elections is internal fight and so on. So first, I can't understand this at all. So my right sequence of events should be peace and then elections. Also, I should tell you that there is an agreement between all parliamentary forces, which was signed, it was, I think, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, that we should definitely, we need to make elections after the war will finish, but we will need 6 months of preparation time after the war will finish, not just a ceasefire, but after the war will finish. And that's clear why, because first, I'm often asked, what should be rebuilt first in Ukraine? Democracy should be rebuilt first. The government controls media. TV controlled almost completely, electronic media partially. People can't rally, there is no big debates and anything. So we need all these to remake.
Although having said that, when I was in Kyiv in June, July last year, I did go to some rallies.
Yeah.
There were 2 or 3.
Yeah, but that were the only rallies because it was about this anti-corruptional law. It was the end of July. It was a very unique situation. It was the only rallies in Ukraine, political rallies in Ukraine, which happened during these 4 years. It was end of July. And by the way, the reason was for this that President Zelenskyy tried to take under his personal control anti-corruptional bodies, which then, after he fell, but it's also interesting, the story, I was one of 13 MPs. We were just 13 in the parliament who voted against his law. We were just 13. The law was adopted. He immediately signed it, which was unprecedented because usually it takes days, sometimes weeks, because there is a preparation work and so on. Immediately it was signed by President Zelenskyy. But immediately this evening the rally started. And in several days, because of the rallies, because people were angry and because of the pressure from the West, he backpedaled. And in 1 week, there was a new vote where my position was voted not by 13, by 350 something, which is absolutely crazy. But that, again, shows you that we need to look at the whole picture if we want to give accessions to his legacy as president.
The corruption scandals have tainted people very close to Zelensky. Is there any suggestion in Ukraine that this taints Zelensky himself?
There is a lot of people are speaking about this, but there is no evidences of this for the moment. In the end of December, Ukrainian parliament created special investigation commission on corruption during martial law time. I was elected its chair. It's a cross-party commission, so we have all representatives, and ruling party members of the parliament also voted for me as a chair. So we now are in the process of our hearings, investigation. So that is one of the questions which we need to answer about President himself. But in any way, very close people to him were involved, and these people were personally chosen by him to their positions. That is very important to understand. So today in Ukraine, all ministers are confirmed by him. All high-level positions are confirmed by President Zelenskyy. And when we see that these people then organized a criminal group and were making corruption and robbing the country, exactly this, the biggest case is about shelters for energy facilities and power grid, which is super painful today because Ukrainians are sitting in the middle of winter when it was 2 weeks ago, it was minus 20 in Kyiv, and people were sitting without heating and electricity in their apartments. There are people literally frozen to death in their apartments in the northern part of Ukraine. You can imagine how painful for people is to know that money which were supposed to protect this power grid from Russian attacks was partly stolen by people who were chosen by President Zelenskyy himself. And these people ran away from the country now. Some of them ran away to Israel, others to Germany, and so on. But they left the country, and that looks very bad.
Final one on politics before we get to the war. You've mentioned a couple of times about the media being under Zelensky's control, and I've heard that as well from media colleagues when I'm here in Ukraine. What is your party's commitment to freedom of press in Ukraine should you ever get government?
We are absolutely committed to freedom of press because freedom of press is a cornerstone of democracy. Without it, it's just impossible. So
It's just that Zelenskyy used to say things like this before he was elected and then changed his mind. So
that's true. But the thing is, so if we're speaking about my party, but again, I am subjective here for sure. But when it was my party, ruling party before elections 2019, I can't say that everything was ideal, but the situation was much better with the freedom of speech. You can ask anybody. And I will give you one example. There is a so-called national teleton, which is all big national TV channels are united in one big channel, which shows absolutely the same. It's called national teleton. So before, for example, 2018, Zelenskyy was every time on central TV channels. I mean, as a candidate, as opposition to that time President Poroshenko, he was always present, nobody. Now at the national teleton, me personally, I'm much more often at BBC, CNN, Fox News, tell me, any big Al Jazeera, anything. Then, not more often, it's not right word. I am 0 times there. For years, zero, and not just me, but my colleagues too. So it's completely partisan. It's completely only one party can be presented there. It's definitely not freedom of speech.
Let's move to the war now. We're approaching 4 years. Does the war end this year, or does it keep going, as some intelligence chiefs and certainly Europeans are starting to say out loud now?
I don't know the answer. But what I do know that we need to do everything we can to stop the war this year. I think it would be extremely risky for us to go for next winter, to continue the war to next winter, because Ukraine is on the edge. Ukrainian people are very exhausted, and we need to do everything we can to stop the war before the end of this year.
Do Ukrainians still want to fight?
Ukrainians are ready to fight. Ukrainians are fighting, and we will continue to fight. We understand why, because surrender will mean for us genocide. But at the same time, there are limits, human limits. I hope these limits will not be reached in years, but I can't be sure about this. I just don't know. This winter was extremely difficult. It was very bad. And yeah, it's also because the winter was harsh, it was very cold, it was freezing and so on. But we don't know how the next winter will be. But I can't guarantee that Ukraine, if anybody would come and say, Ukraine can stand for 10 years more, I mean, it's a very powerful and courageous words. But I would ask, what is evidence? What are the reasons you can say this? And any projection would be just projection, right? But there is some point at which everything could collapse. And we need to do everything we can not to achieve this point, for sure. It's definitely in the best interest of Ukrainians, but it's also in the best interest of all our allies. But what would happen if Ukraine would collapse and all the efforts which were invested in Ukraine, Ukrainian army, which is a super important today and one of the strongest in the world, would be lost and for the civilized world, and so on and so on. We're sitting here in Odesa with you, which on the Black Sea shore. If to imagine that Russia is taking southern part of Ukraine, I'm not even speaking about the whole Ukraine, but southern part of Ukraine, including Odessa, that will mean that Russia, from one of the most important players on energy market of the world, will also become one of the most important players of food market of the world, because Odessa port is the biggest agricultural harbor in the world. And Russia and Ukraine, if you will take all the ratings, we are in top 5 on everything: barley, wheat, sunflower oil, and so on and so on. So that will mean that Russia receives a huge leverage on everybody from a food perspective too. So it's so many risks which the world, I think, should not allow to happen. So that's why I think that all emphasis and all efforts of a civilized world should be to end this war this year.
When you say Ukraine is on the edge, what does that look like? What does that mean? Does it mean you're struggling to get people to go to the front line? Does it mean people are abandoning Ukraine? They're not coming home? What does it look like?
All of this. People are still leaving Ukraine, and every month more people leave Ukraine than come back. We have absolutely catastrophic demographical situation. In 1990, 1 million babies were born in Ukraine. Last year, in the 2024, it was 170,000, 6 times less. Just imagine the numbers. We are struggling to find new people to army. Economy is completely ruined. Energetics is completely ruined. That is where we are.
What kind of peace would Ukrainians settle for?
I think the most possible option today, and probably maybe even the only possible option today, is to stop the war on the current lines, leaving the occupied territories as illegally occupied by Russia, and to receive for Ukraine security guarantees, and then to rebuild the country and everything. Like, we can speak about this. That would be the most possible option and the most feasible option, I would say, the most realistic option.
So let's just live in a hypothetical world and assume Russia is even vaguely interested in peace, which you and I both know they're not.
Russia doesn't want peace, I agree.
So, one, how do we force Russia to peace? And secondly, what are the security guarantees that guarantee your long-lasting peace?
It's not difficult to force Russia to peace, I should tell you. No, Russia doesn't want peace, I agree. But it's not so difficult to force them to peace. What should be done? I will tell you several not super difficult steps. First, to impose secondary sanctions on countries buying Russian oil. Second, to impose sanctions on just 8 refineries in the world, which are major producer of oil products from Russian oil. 4 of them in India, 2 of them in China, and 2 in Turkey. Just 8. 3, seizing of tankers of Russian shadow fleet, not in 1, 2, 3, but in dozens. Absolutely possible. And as the United States showed, Russia can't do anything with this. Absolutely. When they seized their tankers, they were just saying, we are angry, we don't like it. And so they can't do.
Yeah, and there's been no retaliation, we should know.
Absolutely, no retaliation, because Russia is also very exhausted. When I'm saying that Ukraine is exhausted, I don't mean that Russia is not exhausted. Russia is exhausted. The problem is that Russia is much bigger. This is the problem for us in our case, but Russia is exhausted. They don't have capacity for retaliation. So it's time to put a real hard pressure on them. And if to do this, they will not have any other choice than to go to a real negotiations. And this option, and I'm not telling let us demand from Russia to leave all Ukrainian territories. I would like to see this. I am dreaming about this day, and I'm sure this day will come. But I'm not saying let's do this now. So we need to stop how it is, and this is a possible and viable option.
So that would require US pressure.
Absolutely.
But
United States is the key.
But don't you think that Donald Trump has switched sides?
No, I don't think. Look, I think never in his life Donald Trump switched sides, because the only side Donald Trump is on is side of Donald Trump. So you can't switch sides in this case.
That's a very Ukrainian black humor way of putting it, but it's also accurate.
I really believe in this. So I don't believe that he's on Putin's side, but it doesn't mean that he's on Ukrainian side. He's on his side. But on his side, I think there is a lot of reasons. He has a lot of motivation to end the war. Nobel Peace Prize, possibly. Many people are like laughing at this or something. I'm not laughing at this. Why should I laugh? I absolutely accept, and I would be one of the first to say, yes, let's give to Donald Trump Nobel Peace Prize if he will help to stop the war here. Why not? I mean, it's really will be a huge thing. Thousands of lives would be saved. Thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. Then, secondly, it will be good for him politically inside the United States. He will show himself as a peacemaker, as a person who did what Biden failed to do, and so on. Great. We see that he wants after this more economic cooperation with Russia. I will not tell you I'm a big fan of this, but I understand, let's them make money, okay. Again, I'm not, that doesn't mean that I want this. I don't want this. But okay, if they want it, they can do this, and I can't do anything to stop it and to prevent. So I think that Trump has a lot of motivation to stop the war. And I really think, and I think he also likes to keep his promises, as any politician. Not always we can, but he promised to stop the war several times. So I think he wants, and that's why I think he is motivated. The only thing we need to show to him, that this is the strange thing, that he still believes that he can do it through red carpets with Putin and other things. That's something I don't understand, because it's so obvious for me that it can be done, his goals can be achieved only by hard pressure on Putin. So I'm waiting for the moment he will do this.
So let's talk about the security guarantees. What keeps Ukraine safe if a deal is struck?
Definitely, we need security guarantees, and this is a super important question. We would like the best possible option would be membership in NATO by controlled territories. It doesn't look possible today, we understand this, but I'm telling about the best options. If not these, we can have a special treaty with the United States, kind of Japan has, for example. This is a very good treaty which says that the United States will not help to liberate occupied territories. Don't forget that Japan also has occupied territories by Russia. This is northern territories, Kuril Islands. But if Japan will be again attacked by Russia, then the United States will need to go to the war. So this formula works great with Ukraine. So this can be a very good security guarantee. Also, membership in European Union. Definitely, European Union is not a military alliance, but there is a paragraph 42.5, I think.
Yes, I mean, interestingly, you were at Munich Security Conference, so was I. Ursula von der Leyen talked about activating this clause.
Yes.
In lieu of NATO, if you go into the EU, do you believe that would provide you with military protection, or do you really think EU is about economic security?
Look, it will mean that EU will help us. Will EU help us militarily, sending troops to Ukraine? I'm not sure. But it means that they will give us money, weapons, that they will impose sanctions, so they will do at least everything else they can. At least everything else they can. The thing is that, unfortunately, in this world, there is no 100% guarantee. And if I would tell you, even though I'm saying to you, Japan has a great treaty with the United States.
Yeah, how much could you trust a current US administration?
The thing is, nobody knows. Nobody knows how Article 5 will work. Nobody knows how this Japanese treaty will work. Because only President of the United States, in the moment of need, will make a decision. And who can tell you who will be next president of the United States? Who can tell you what Trump will do exactly in this or that situation? So there is no 100% guarantee. But if you have a number of things, you have a treaty with the United States, you have EU membership, you have a long-term commitments for Ukrainian army. It's a reality, yeah. So long-term commitments for financing of Ukrainian army, because the best guarantee, and I'm coming to this, for Ukraine is Ukrainian army. So we need to continue to build it. And that was, coming back to the beginning of our conversation, big mistake from Zelenskyy to stop doing this, because maybe that was one of the things that provoked Putin, because he thought Ukraine is weak. So sivi pace para bellum. You want to have peace, get prepared to the war.
So when I interviewed Dmytro Kuleba, your former foreign minister, on this podcast, he told me that Ukraine doesn't really need the coalition of the willing and that no European troops would step foot in Ukraine. Is that your view too?
My view is that I would not say Ukraine doesn't need coalition of the willing, because coalition of the willing is now also buying weapons for Ukraine from Americans and so on. It's also super important. But I personally asked President Macron in Munich that when coalition of the willing will become coalition of sending troops to Ukraine. I think that's what we need.
Do you mean before a ceasefire?
Before ceasefire. I mean now.
Boris Johnson has proposed this, and I had Kurt Volker, the former Ukraine envoy, on my podcast too, and asked him, and he agreed about sending the coalition of the willing now. But Macron told you that would be escalatory.
Yes. No, I think it's a mistake from Macron. And I think it's a mistake not only from Macron, but from Great Britain too, which also lead together with France, coalition of the willing, when they have this formula, we will send troops after the end of war. Because in Putin translation, I'm sure about this, it means that's one more reason not to end the war. So much better signal to Putin will be sending the troops now, not to fight against Russians. I understand that politically it's impossible today that French and British mothers will agree their sons to fight in Ukraine. But to send professional army just as a backup force with a specific tasks, for example, protecting Belarusian Ukrainian border, protecting Odesa harbor, training Ukrainian troops in the Western Ukraine, and so on and so on. So there are cybersecurity and many other things, because this will be a signal to Putin. Stop the war now, because there is no sense to continue, because you can't take Odessa. To take Odessa, you will need to kill all the troops which are here, I don't know, from France. But France is nuclear power, member of NATO, and so on. So how he can do this? He can't.
So you think Macron's "this might escalate" is more self-deterrence from the West?
Definitely. It's continuation of these steps which are good, but not good enough.
I just want to pick you up on the training, because My Native Australia, and I think even New Zealand in the UK, is helping train Ukrainians on British soil.
Yeah.
Why would it be important to have them move to Ukraine?
It is important. First of all, it will speed up everything. But most important for me is, like what I told you, that would be a symbolic act of our allies to show their commitment to Ukrainians, by the way, too. That will boost Ukrainian morale very seriously. People will believe much more in the future of the country, knowing that French, British, Polish, Estonian soldiers are standing here. And that will be a signal to Putin. It's not so important how many soldiers they will train in this camp. It is important that Putin knows that they're here. That will show for him, if you can take what you can now, take under control, which is controls. Do it, stop the war. There is no sense to continue.
And just finally, I want to end on a more positive note. Tell me about your beautiful city, Odesa. I visited the port this morning, obviously a bit of a sleepless night because of the drone attacks. Was it drone attacks?
Yes, it was drone attacks.
Yeah, and very close. And I visited your beautiful opera house this morning. What was Odesa life like before the war, and what do you hope it will be after the war?
First of all, I would tell that Odessa is a super strategic place. It's the biggest city on the Black Sea shore, not just in Ukraine, biggest city, period. Because Istanbul is not on Black Sea. All other cities are smaller. Odessa is the biggest harbor of the Black Sea. And maybe Odessa is the most well-known Black Sea city in the world. So Odessa is the capital of the Black Sea, super strategic place. And we should all understand this. But also it's a very beautiful city. It's a lovely city. And the life here was always, Odessa was always well known for great atmosphere, a lot of humor, people chilling, having time, listening to opera, swimming in the sea. And I should tell you, Odessa, even today, it's sometimes crazy. It looks crazy. Odessa people come to beaches, and sometimes it's like surrealistic. I was with my junior boy on the beach, like, for example, all these years, but last year there was a Russian attack. And there was a missile intercepted just like in the light of everybody. So people were lying on the beach, swimming and so on. And then the Russian missile coming, then intercepted by Ukrainian missile. Yes, people watched at this, but for your understanding, like nobody even stopped to drink their cocktail. Like it becomes so crazy, but also, yes, such pictures you can find. So Odessa is a wonderful place. Welcome to Odessa to all who listens to us now, after the war for sure, but also during the war too, who are interested, come. We'll be happy. We're making big events here, so we'll be happy to host here guests. Probably Odessa is the capital of Ukrainian hospitality. We're ready to show this.
Well, Oleksii Goncharenko, thank you for having me in Odessa. And thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
And good luck to your country.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Latika Takes with me, Latika Bourke. You can find my work at latikambbourke.com and this podcast where you find all your podcasts. See you next time.